and welcome to IRSportsDaily.com, or the Hit and Hustle from IRSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang. With me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Jamie University. It is Thursday, January 26th. We're going to be talking about a little update on Justin Scott, the 2024 defensive lineman. Plans are changing, as I'm sure many of you have heard, so we're going to go over that a little bit. We're going to talk about Jamie's ISD Fab 50, the final installment for the 2023 class before we move headlong into the 2024 class. We're going to talk about that. Only one Notre Dame player makes it. And then Jamie can talk a little bit about the 2018 class, I think, and his hit rate. Listen, I think you had, 25 or 27 of 50 players drafted, Jamie? Is that correct?
Did I say that right? 22 drafted, 5 guys who are either projected to be drafted or were all conference guys. So, got it. Some guys are, don't get drafted, but if you're a
good college
SEC
player,
or something,
it counts.
I think that counts as a hit. Yeah.
Counts. We're counting it. All right. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about the offseason priorities for the Notre Dame defense. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for joining the show. If you like what you hear, hit the like, hit the subscribe button as always, and hit the notification bell. Rajon was here early to spend some quality time with the like button. Rajon was late to the show on Tuesday, and he wanted to spend some time before we got going with the like button, and have some quiet time. So that's very nice of him to do that. Rajon, thank you for joining. Joe Bro as well. Thank you. Chris, you're not late, man. We've only been going for like 3 minutes now. So not late. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you everyone for on replay. If you like, one more time, hit the like, hit subscribe button, hit the notification bell. All right, Jamie, let's talk about Justin Scott. Let's do like a kind of a recap. So 2-3 weeks ago, we were on our show and people were asking questions about why is Al Washington bad? Why does he not know how to recruit players?
Yeah, maybe just what? Yeah, okay.
I
don't need to get on a rant again.
He's bad on the D line. He doesn't know what he's doing.
Horrible recruiter.
Then I guess it was a week after that when Notre Dame was going to see Justin Scott, reported by Matt Freeman on the ISD message board, talking about Notre Dame's making a push for him. They're going to go see him at his school. Big Chicago push. Maybe a couple days after that, Justin Scott says, I'm going to make a commitment January 31st. I'm going to commit. And it was like, whoa, okay. Like that really escalated. And then I guess there was Matt made a prediction on Irish Sports Daily that he predicted Justin Scott to pick Notre Dame at that point. And then there was the announced visit January 22nd. He was going to come in, and that was like a big deal, right? And then no other visits. Then that got pushed to the 29th, which was again like even better news, because it's like I'm going to the 29th, announcing the 31st, no other visits in between. And then earlier this week, the announcement by him, this is all him. It's not reporting. This is Justin Scott saying on his Twitter page that he's delaying his announcement to the 31st. And as of right now, the visit for the 29th is still going to happen as of this moment. Could change, obviously. Things are very fluid.
Weather-wise, yeah.
Yeah, things are very fluid in this recruitment. So that's where it is. And I think predictably, whenever there's a change in plan like that, especially commitment, a player that has been predicted to choose Notre Dame, a lot of fans are, on the he's gone. He's gone. It's over. It's bad.
I do enjoy he gone. Everybody does. Everyone does that.
Yeah.
They got to be I got to be the guy in the message board. The first to post.
Yeah, I got to say it. Hey, I'm predicting. Like, I'm just telling you, like, I got to be right.
I told you first.
Gone. And here's the thing, guys. I do think we really need to get to a place where
we got to get rid of he gone. He gone.
Well,
he gone's got to get gone.
Like when updates come in, it just, I know it's probably bad for our business and like engagement and that sort of thing, But like when an update like this comes in, maybe let's just all work on. Let's spend some quiet time, like Rajon is with the like button. Let's spend some quiet time on just saying, "Oh, that's interesting."
Oh, we'll see what happens.
And we'll see what happens. It just, that's how it could be, right? And everyone's like, oh, Peyton Bowen and Keon Keeley. It's like, look, Jeremiah Love delayed an announcement. Said he was going to announce one time. Then it was like, oh, I'm going to go to Texas A&M and take some other trips. And he gone and all these other things. And now he's on campus at Notre Dame, right? Like, we don't know how these things are going to go. And there's no point in doomsday, doom scrolling, doom messaging over stuff. Just take it as it is. Like, I don't like, and maybe he won't end up at Notre Dame, right? Like, I would say, but at the time, it was like where it was. If he had kept the timeline and the visit and everything, I would say the chances of him committing to Notre Dame at that point were like 99%.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'd say it's probably like 75%, So it's like, look, it hurts the chances. Of course it does, right? Like, he was going to commit and then he didn't, or he was going to announce and then he's not announcing, right? And he's take visits. Like, that's just on the face of it. Like, that's not a good development for landing him, but it doesn't mean that it's over and it's like terrible, right? Like I said, 3 weeks ago, everyone was like, why can't we even talk to this guy? No one's even talking to him. And now it's like, he was going to commit and now he didn't. And so then the world is over. Like, I don't think that's a good place either. I think they're fine. So, it's not a good thing in terms of landing him that he didn't visit, but maybe it's a good thing in the long run, where it's if he wants to see places, let him go see places. It's better, right? It's better than the Peyton Bowen thing.
I think the Peyton Bowen thing should be a lesson to everyone that I think that was trash. You know what I mean? Like, that was not a good thing for Notre Dame. I don't think that would have been a good thing for any school, that you have your guy who's committed to you is taking more visits to all these other places somewhere else. That's bad. That's bad. I mean, and as it proved to be, even though he stayed active in the chat, well, he was taking all these visits he went to Oklahoma 5 times in the times that he'd been to Notre Dame once or something like that.
Yeah.
That's not good. That's not good, And I think with
staff in a bad spot.
Yeah, it does. And then all of a sudden it makes the other guys be like, well, why am I committed? Why am I doing this? And there's a lot of that. And I'm not saying like, if you want to, obviously you're going to have different rules for different guys. And Bowen was the kind of guy you would maybe have a little bit more leeway with. I get it. But I think with Justin Scott, here's the worst case scenario that could happen. He commits to Notre Dame, and on the 31st, everyone's like, yes. Spring game comes around. He goes to Georgia instead of Notre Dame, or fill in the blank there. That's a lot worse. That's a lot worse. Or he's using his spring break to take trips to these other schools that he didn't get a chance to do. Oh, but he's committed to Notre Dame. Well, he's not committed, right? Like, that's just the thing. So if he wants to get out and see these places, fine. That's whatever, right? I mean, it's not good if he doesn't, like I'll say with Rajon mentioned, if he doesn't come to Notre Dame the Sunday and then he doesn't come for like spring practice, yeah, that's not good.
Right.
I mean, no one's going to debate that. But I think if, when it comes down to it, if he's interested and not 100% sure, it's a worse thing for him to do, to go and commit and then just lock it down, because I think one of those things, and I think this is something that Matt Freeman has talked about a lot, is that the strategy of Notre Dame, primarily under Marcus Freeman, has been, if you commit to us, then we know you're the leader. We're the leader. And then that sets the bar, whatever. And I think there's some good in that, in trying to lock guys down, but it can backfire. And it did backfire on them. Right. And I think you just don't want to be in a position where all of a sudden you a guy's taking a bunch of visits elsewhere and he's not coming to your place. Like, I just think that you don't want a Peyton Bowen situation with anyone. So I think no matter when Justin Scott decides to come in, who knows, right? Who knows when he will. It's better if he's still not sure, even if he goes on these visits or doesn't. Don't choose this week. Why did he choose January 31st? Like, I don't know. It's not like one of those things as far as
I think it was his birthday.
It was his birthday?
I think
so.
So.
But like, this happens all the time. Guys are like, I got to do it. It's my grandma's birthday. I'm September 17th.
Well, that was what Peyton Bowen did, wasn't it? It was
thing,
or it was something like that.
Kids always do that, and I get it. It's a nice gesture. It sounds cool, whatever, right? And it's like, oh, I'm doing this, or I'm going to do this. It's our homecoming and whatever. How about just do it when you're ready? Yeah. And that's why too, like, when you plan something because you want to have like a big announcement, I get it. People want their day. That's fine. Whatever, people want to celebrate that. But like, how many of the guys that quietly commit and just like send out a tweet, or maybe even don't, they just like do even less than that. They just like all of a sudden give an interview and say like, hey, I committed and whatever. And that's that. How many of those guys decommit?
Yeah.
Not a lot, I don't think. Like, a lot of those guys kind of stick to, because it's like they don't care about all the other things, right? And I'm not ripping on anyone who has to do a big thing, but I'm just saying, when you're trying to plan it around a day and you're not ready yet, that would have been much worse for him. So I'm happy for him that he's not rushing into it. I think it's ultimately a better thing for Notre Dame that he's not rushing into it and committing before then. And now you see what happens, and you hope that Notre Dame is able to land it.
Right, because Rajon,
and they're still in a good position. Sorry,
Rajon says better now than in September, and that's obviously true. But I think the other part too is, I know Notre Dame's has the potential to take a very big D-line class this year.
Yeah.
But as you start stacking up commitments, right? Let's say Justin Scott commits, and let's say the Twins commit, and then you get Bryce Young, and then you start adding in guys, right? And the spot's filling up. It's like we have 5 now, and it's like, well, we'll take 7. It's like, but 6 and 7 for them, it's kind of like, it kind of takes, it's like, I'm the 6th guy in this class, or I could be the number 1 guy. And I don't know how TJ, I'm going to use TJ Lindsey as an example. I don't know how he feels about it. Right. So I know that he's someone who Notre Dame is after, who plays a similar position as Justin Scott. And so it could cost you traction with TJ Lindsey, who you might really want in the class, so like, you don't want a soft commitment in someone who's going to be taking visits all the time. And then you're pushing for TJ Lindsey, and TJ Lindsey's like, well, this other guy's in the class. Like, I don't know. And then he leaves in September. Then it's like, now you're out 2 players, now you've cost yourself 2 guys. Right. And so that's kind of how I view it. So, just to kind of put a bow on it. It's not the greatest development, but it's not the worst either. Like, it just is what it is, right? Like, and we'll see, right? Someone who wants to end up at Notre Dame will do the things that someone who ends up at the school will do, right? They'll take a bunch of visits. They will stay involved. They won't be absent from the school for months at a time, right? Like the whole Dante Moore thing. Like, oh, I've been to Notre Dame a bunch. I'm going to go all over the country. It's like, well, no. If you want to go to Notre Dame, you're going to go to Notre Dame, regardless of how many times. So, Baby Beast, we haven't forgotten about you.
I got to be honest, Baby Beast, I did forget about you.
No,
but I'm glad to have you back.
No.
I did forget about Baby Beast because he was a very active guy.
That's right.
And I just thought Baby Beast had went away. So.
Hey, can't type back on a Roku TV.
Welcome back, Baby
Sorry
Beast.
about that, Baby Beast. Glad you're here. All right, let's transition. ISD Fab 50, 2023. Only Charles DeGusa makes it. Number 49 on the Fab 50. I'm going to venture this guess, Jamie. I bet you Notre Dame had a bunch of guys if you did a Fab 100, I think a lot of 51 to 100. I think Notre Dame would have had a bunch of guys in there. Jeremiah Love being one, Christian Gray being another, maybe Drake Bowen being another. So, what would you say about that? First,
I would say that
Nathan Erbach, thank you. What's up? Joined a little late, no problem, man.
I mean, Braylon James would have been
Braylon
in
James
it for me. Great House would have been in it, and probably Jaden Osbury too. Okay. I mean, they're all kind of right there on the fringe or whatever. I mean, I used to do where I'm like, okay, now I'm just gonna have it just so I have it in my mind of like whatever, but like there just is not enough time for me to do it. So where I used to like rank up to like 250 whatever on my own kind of thing, but then I'm like, why am I doing this? No one else is gonna see this except for me. So I gotta let you know that this guy is 73rd or whatever. Like, I don't really, it's not that important. It's more important that you just know that whatever. And the way that I put it, and somebody kind of asked about it, basically there are guys that, there are 13 guys in the class that I would say are like top 150-ish in the class to me, like top 150-ish, top 200, 150 to 200, those guys. That's more than they've had in a while. Like, I mean, a lot of BK classes, they didn't even have 13 4-stars, period, because they would get a decent number of guys that were in the 250 to 400 range. Not that some of those guys end up being really good players, right? But like, just there is there's tiers to everything, right? There's different tiers of how you kind of view it, right? So I think Notre Dame has a lot more guys this year that I think have a chance to be quality players a little bit earlier than some of the other guys, but they don't have, I mean, frankly, you look at it, there's just comparatively to kind of like what, say, Alabama, who had, I think 9 or whatever in this, or maybe it was 8. I can't remember. Let me look at the thing again. Alabama had, well, first of all, the SEC, 31 out of the 48 who were actually committed or signed. Yeah, that's a lot. Alabama 9, Georgia 7, right? So that's a lot of guys, right? That's 16 guys just to those 2 schools. And I think that's not biased. Those guys, they're dudes. They got a bunch of dudes. And I think like it's kind of proven that, what they've done there. And it's kind of continued on from whatever, like I mentioned in 6 Thoughts today, that, they've signed, both of them have signed since 2018, over 30 guys that I've had as top 50 guys.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame has had 12. So they're basically getting 3 times the amount of guys that Notre Dame has in that time. And just when you have that, I mean, they have plenty of guys who end up being bust that don't play or transfer out and all that too. But when you have enough of those guys that hit, it's like when Notre Dame has, if Houston Griffith doesn't turn out to be a guy to live up to his ranking, I mean, that hurts Notre Dame a lot because they don't have enough guys like that. So basically you have a chance to have more Kyle Hamiltons, who was a Fab 50 guy, and Michael Mayer, who were Fab 50 guys, when, you sign more of them. And then because you're, I think with Hamilton, he was the only guy that I had in the top 50 that year. And thankfully he ended up being a stud, 1st round pick, amazing safety, one of the best safeties ever for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's plenty of Max Redfields out there too, right? Yeah. So it's just one of those things where you just want to be able to sign more and more of those guys. And I mean, it's tough. They didn't sign, the main thing is Keon Keeley, Peyton Bowen, Dante Moore. That changes the dynamic of it.
Yeah.
But even with that was the other thing. There was like 8 guys, I would say. Those guys were included in the 8, right? that they really kind of like were contenders for, I would say. Like, you know, guys took maybe like visits where they were in like their maybe like top 3, like that's what I would say. Or like guys that they were, or in their top 5, like guys that they were really considering them. And you know, they didn't land any of those guys. Charles Jagusa was the only guy, right? So that's tough. I mean, that's really tough. Like, even if you look at, say, like you know, on the offensive line, Caden Proctor, who ended up was committed to Iowa, whatever, and his thing was like a school thing. He couldn't get into school, but like that's a guy that you would want to have, like, especially at an O-line position for Notre Dame. That's the kind of guy that you would want to have more of those kind of guys.
Right. Nathan Urbox asks, where would you have Brandon Hillman? So would you have him in the top 250? Would you have him in the top 150, 100, and that sort of thing? And it should note he's coming off of a, I guess what we'd say, an impressive performance in the Polynesian Bowl. Here, I think he won. I think it was Brennan Huffman of 247 had him as the defensive MVP for that, not just for the game but for the week. So where would you have Brandon Hillman in that? Just top of mind.
I think he was like a top 250 guy for me, for sure. I think, you know, as I kind of mentioned when on signing day, I think just in terms of his pure potential and his ceiling, I think he's a guy that you could be talking about like a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, where all of a sudden you're like, this guy ends up being the best guy in the class, right? I think that is a definite possibility. Now, with him, it's one of the reasons why he's, and I think he's an electric athlete and exciting and whatever. And that's why that hit the performance of the All-Star game was, I think, big, because you heard about him as a safety. And I think that's ultimately going to play. And I know saying he's going to be Peyton Bowen, but I mean, if he ends up being a stud safety, then, you know, you lose Peyton Bowen, it doesn't hurt quite as much, right? So what's his position? Where's his best fit? Is he going to find that? That's part of the thing with me. With him, I do think he's going to be a very good player. When is that going to happen for him? You know, there's a more, you know, and when there's a guy who doesn't have a defined fit, there is a chance that they miss too, right? Because they don't have that defined thing. But I'm certainly super high on him. I think he's going to be, has a chance to be great for Notre Dame.
Yeah. This will be the last question on this topic, and then we're going to move on to the defense. S. Gomez asks, we tend to wave our hands and blame NIL for every Fab 50 miss. But what's the realistic pitch and variables for Notre Dame to start landing more top guys? I'm really glad this question came up, because I was thinking about this before the show, about Notre Dame's approach and all these other things. And I think what we're going to start to see is, as more and more big players, star players at Notre Dame start, you know, getting involved in the NIL opportunities that Notre Dame offers for players on campus, that becomes more and more tangible and real for recruits. So Kyle Hamilton is an example. Michael Mayer is an example. Isaiah Foskey is an example, right? And that's all new. And it's like, for the players, it's more like or for a high school player, it's more like projecting in the future.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, I don't know, like, can I really count on that? When you start to see guys like Sam Hartman and Blake Fisher now, and Joe Alt now, and Ben Morrison and Cam Hart, and when those guys, when more players start to take advantage of the opportunities that Notre Dame is pitching right now, that becomes a more of a real thing, like something you can actually count on. The other part too is, I think that there is going to be a real bring back of the guaranteed money that's going out right now, because we're starting to see some of this stuff is starting to fall apart. Yeah, like Jaden Rashada, like it started to fall apart. And I've heard other things, right? Like I've talked to people who are involved with collectives for other schools, and that person was saying, like, this is all going to kind of blow up pretty soon, right? Because you just can't sustain the numbers. Like, money is being promised to players that aren't on hand, and they have to make it. And if they can't make it, the player has really no recourse, because it's all kind of in a gray area, right? And Notre Dame isn't operating in a gray area. Notre Dame is operating in, like, this is the money that you are going to make. Now, it may not be 13 million or whatever, like Jaden Rashada is, but it's real money, and it's legit money. And it's, and not just that, it's acquired in a way that helps you in life.
Yeah.
Kyle Hamilton, the way that he made his money, it's all marketing. It's all marketing himself. And he's coming back to school to get a marketing degree. Like, it helps him for his entire life, all of this stuff. So that's where I think Notre Dame should honestly, just at this point, stay the course, be consistent, keep the genuineness that is driving everything. Like, people are always talking about how genuine Marcus Freeman is and that sort of thing. That's the way to go, in my opinion, is like, just keep doing what you're doing, because at some point it's all going to level out. Like, they're going to catch up, and things will start to get better on that front. And so that's my take. Jamie, do you have an opinion?
First of all, I think it's really well said, because I think that here's one thing that probably, I mean, definitely these collectives aren't thinking about. I mean, they're just thinking about getting the best guys. And obviously, like, Notre Dame wants to get more Fab 50 guys. They want all these elite guys. I get it, right? Obviously, it's better. In saying that, and, you know, so I wrote about in 6 Thoughts today, like, you know, I looked at, since I started doing this for ISD in 2018 was the first year that I started ranking these national recruits. And, you know, I looked at, you know, the hit rate, right? And how many guys got drafted, how many guys got first round picks, how many guys were top 3 rounds, whatever, all conference guys who were like basically studs at their school. So I tied for the highest percentage of guys. So 27 out of 50, 54%. 54%. That means that like 23 guys didn't live up to expectations, right? Essentially, right? And that's the most, right? And I would say, like, it's kind of, and that's probably pretty realistic for recruiting, for NFL draft or whatever. A lot of guys, I mean, if you have over a 50% hit rate, that's good, really, because for whatever reason, whether it's injuries, whether it's whatever off the field stuff, whatever it is, maybe just bad evaluations, whatever, guys miss. And this is what's going to happen, and why NIL is going to come back to haunt some of these guys, is because there's going to be guys who get promised a lot of money that miss. And when that happens, and when it's not guaranteed contracts, like, you know, I mean, the NFL is not guaranteed contracts, but still they have signing bonuses or whatever. When that does happen, what happens when people are like, nah, I'm not cutting the check for that one? Like, that's going to happen. And it is kind of probably already kind of seeing that, like, there were like false promises for people. Yeah. So when just there's such a high percentage of guys of the highest ranked recruits that don't make it, like, I just don't see it. So, like, I mean, just let's say Jaden Lamar, for example, of a guy who was, you know, a good prospect or whatever. I mean, whatever. It's not one of the reasons he flipped to Oregon. I think people could figure it out. And, you know, and I don't know if it's like he's not breaking the bank or anything like that. But if he's a guy who's not playing in year 3 or even year 2, are they still sending him that check? I don't know. Right. Like, right. I don't think it's guaranteed. Right. So I think a lot of that could come back to bite. And I think really kind of like leading back into what you were saying, Greg, I think the most important part for Notre Dame is where you'll see if Sam Hartman has, you know, a monster year, like we mentioned, he was like 4th in Heisman odds or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say he's a top 5 quarterback in college football this year. I think it's an achievable thing that he could be a top 5 quarterback for college football this year. So if he's a top 5 quarterback and he's like a Heisman contender, and Notre Dame is like 11-1, and he's having a monster year, and he's proven his draft stock and all that kind of stuff, and he's really taken advantage of the NIL stuff, that would be the best thing for Notre Dame. Yes. Because then they can point to that and say, look at this guy. You can be that guy. Or you're even better than this guy, though it's going to happen when you do it. Like, that's the kind of thing that I think matters the most, because we always mentioned Brady Quinn would have broke the bank. Right. And I think actually if like Brady Quinn was there today, that would have been the perfect example of like, this is what a Notre Dame guy can be worth as a quarterback. And this is why being the quarterback for Notre Dame is worth so much. Yeah. Like Jimmy Clausen would have got a ton of bank. Like all these guys would have got bank. And then when it comes down to it too, that's when it's like, and as good as Michael Mayer was, and as good as like Isaiah Foskey was, it's different if it's a quarterback. It's different if there is, and as good as Joe Alt is, right? Like, being a left tackle, I mean, especially an O-lineman, I don't think he's going to break the bank no matter what, because he's probably not a guy who's going to sell himself in that way. And people just, I mean, frankly, O-linemen just aren't worth as much to a lot of people. But if Notre Dame gets, like Benjamin Morrison's a perfect example. He's probably going to be a preseason All-American. Mm-hmm. So let's say he has an All-American type season. And that means he's going to have an All-American season and then be an All-American going into the next season. Well, he's going to be the guy. Like, if people aren't giving him money for Notre Dame, that will hurt recruiting more than anything.
Right.
He's going to be the guy who needs to get paid if that happens. Because if he gets paid and he's, making all these monies and money and getting all these opportunity, that's what you point to and say, look, this is what happens when you're the dude at Notre Dame. This is what happens. And like, I think Manti Te'o, when he was that dude, he would have made a ton of money. Jalen Smith, whatever. You got to be, those are the guys you want to point to, because everybody thinks they can be that dude.
Right. And then Notre Dame could say, like, we'll teach you how to make money.
Yes.
For your own self. So that it's not some guy giving it to you.
Yeah.
You are going to go earn it. Right. And you are going to have that knowledge as you move on in life. That's the
LeBron
4 for 40. Right. Like
that's also LeBron. Right. That's like what LeBron isn't just who he is because he's a great basketball. He's obviously just a phenomenal basketball player, but he is a brand, and he has built his brand, and obviously with his team and all that too. But he's obviously a very intelligent guy who has managed his brand very smartly. And that's kind of what it's about. And that's what Notre Dame should help provide to you, that I think a lot of these big schools are trying to do too. But, Notre Dame should have I would think that'd be something that Notre Dame should try to have an edge in.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Matt's listening, and LeBron was invoked in a positive way, and that makes him happy for the first time in forever. So,
I mean, he's got the Bengals, so he's
yeah, it's true. Yeah. All right. Let's transition to the off-season priorities for the defense now. So we did the offense on Tuesday, and if you haven't watched that, go back and go to Hit and Hustle, and it's in the playlist, right? You can find that. Very good show. If I may say so myself. So we talk about the defense. We're going to talk about the things that they need to do to kind of take the next step as a defense, right? And I think the first point that you brought up in your article, and you can check this article out, you could just search. You can go to irisportsdaily.com, or you can search online. You can just search defensive priorities Notre Dame, and it'll come up. It's the first thing that comes up. The first thing you bring up is the red zone defense, right? So obviously Notre Dame was a awful red zone defensive team last year. Fortunately for them, they were very good in preventing teams from getting to the red zone in the first place, right? So that's what kept the points down and that sort of thing. But defensively, it was not good when teams did get to the red zone. It was almost an automatic touchdown. So, Jamie, why don't you talk about some of the numbers and what Notre Dame can do to mitigate some of this poor play?
So they were dead last in red zone touchdown percentage.
That's bad.
Dead last. So at 79 something percent, which is basically like, like you said, pretty close to automatic touchdowns, right? When teams reach the red zone. I think I kind of wrote at the time, I probably need to dive deeper into why all of that happened, but it happened. That's something that, I mean, Notre Dame, if they're not digging deeper into why, that's a problem. But they were 13th in echo rate, which is this metric that Parker Flammang, who is a stats kind of guru guy who used to write for Football Outsiders, and I think he does some like Bet US stuff or whatever now. And anyways, he's a great follow on Twitter. You should check him out. Yeah. Stats of War. He created this metric called echo rate, and it is the rate of productive drives. And Notre Dame was 13th in productive drives. They were 10th in total red zone possessions against. Mm-hmm. So they did a really good job in that sense. And that's why they were still a top 25 in points per drive. Like, that's why they were a good scoring defense. But then just imagine if they were just half decent in the red zone, then they're probably like a top 10, right? So, and they were 4th in red zone touchdown percentage the year before, right? So, so that's what Rajon said. Like, they were actually great the year before, right? With Marcus Freeman as defensive coordinator, and they were always pretty good under Clark Lee as well, right? So, I mean, I think part of it has to be scheme. When you're dead last, part of it has to be. Part of it is personnel. Part of it has to be scheme, because I and I mentioned that they didn't have in another piece. I mentioned how the havoc rate was like really low compared to like the year before. It was like 19%, which is like very good to elite, and it was like 11%. The thing, and that's a huge drop. That's bad, right? That's like one of the worst you could be. So they weren't creating enough negative plays, and when you're not creating enough negative plays, it's obviously easier to score touchdowns. And so were they pressuring enough? Were they too vanilla in their scheme? I don't know. I mean, I'll have to go back and look at every single play, but obviously, they did not have their finger on the pulse of what to do in those situations. I mean, you can just say it, like Al Golden needed to do a better job there because the players didn't execute what they were supposed to, and they didn't get stops in the red zone. And all they asked too, no one asked for you to just, get 0 most of the time. They just ask you, hold them to 3. Yeah. Hold them to 3, right? Or hold them, and especially college kickers, maybe an attempt, right? Just an attempt, because that might be good enough to make it 0. And they couldn't do it.
So I'm gonna throw up another one, and I'm gonna throw up another one here, and I think it might be related to the red zone thing. And one of the offseason priorities was shore up the run defense, right? So Notre Dame was not awful against the run, but teams could run against them.
Yes.
And I think that was, in previous years, you just didn't run at Notre Dame like that. No. Like it just wasn't a thing, right? And we saw some like poor rushing teams have some really good games against Notre Dame, like BYU, for example. Ran the ball really well against Notre Dame. USC ran the ball really well against Notre Dame. And I think that when you have a situation where you can't count on your front guys, the front 4 and the 2 linebackers, in the red zone to be, run stoppers and that sort of thing, you have to scheme in order to protect that, in which case it leaves you vulnerable to other parts of the field, right? I think the other part too is like you lose someone like Kyle Hamilton, you lose someone like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, right? Like you lose erasers in the red zone, and that it's like a really big problem, right? Like, you want erasers, and you want erasers in the red zone. So I think those two things are somewhat related there, where they need to find some, and like another one too is increased havoc rate, right? I think it's all interconnected.
It's all kind of
like it's all kind of one thing where and I'll just put that up too. Like, so between red zone defense, increased havoc rate, and shore up the run defense, I think they're all connected, and they're causing the same kind of issue in the red zone, and then just for the defense as a whole. So I guess showing up the run defense and red zone defense and increasing the havoc rate. I think it's all. I think increasing the havoc rate is the most important of all of them, because
it goes hand in hand.
It goes hand in hand.
All of a sudden, the red zone defense gets better. All of a sudden, the run defense gets better. Yeah, because you're putting them in negative situations where it's like, well, we can't run the ball here because all of that. Yeah,
right. So where does this come from, in your opinion? Just like what Notre Dame has right now, where does this come from? I have some ideas, but I'm wondering if you're thinking similar to me.
Okay, first of all, I mean, I mentioned in the piece about the havoc rate too that he started out 12.2% when they were 3-3.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously that's horrible.
Right.
And then they finished off the last 7 games 18.1%, which is good. That's fine, right? Like it's not elite, but it's good, right? Like that's fine. You can live with that in the whole season, but so you end up meet in the middle. They were like 15 something percent.
Yeah,
and that's below average. You don't want to be that. So I think what it comes down to is part of it is scheme, right? Part of it is scheme. Like, I think there is a mentality of like when you were something you talked about this year, and we've kind of talked about like giving up take this, we're going to give you that, the field. We're going to give you that little hitch, the 5-yard hitch. You're going to take that, take it. Right. And which is a very NFL mentality. Right. And and obviously he comes from the NFL, the algorithm comes from the NFL. That's part of it. But I think that was it was also kind of a Clark Lee mentality too, right? He gave up a lot of that stuff, but he changed how he called the game once teams got into like plus territory. That was when Clark Lee became a lot more aggressive. You saw a lot more pressure. You saw a lot. He was different, right? And it's like everybody used to call like Clark Lee passive. He's just like playing bend and don't break. No, he was playing smart, and then he attacked when this is the point when you need to attack because you're trying to avoid giving up points, and this is one of the best ways to do it, right? Is create negative plays. So I think some of it, like I mean, I will go to my deathbed talking about how the Notre Dame misused the defensive line this year in terms of like slanting and stunts and some of that, and that gradually came in later on in the year, but they didn't do that enough. Like,
yeah,
Howard Cross is going to be a better player if he's starting in the B gap and slanting to the A. Like that just fits his game more than saying like, hey, hold the point at the B and just, take on a double here. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously you're not going to slant every play, but you got to do more. You have to do more movement. You got to mess up blocking schemes more. So that's part of it. One, I think some of like the pressure stuff wasn't very creative. I mean, how many times can you run a cross dog? Like 1 million? That's probably what they did this year. Like, it's fine. I don't mind that being like a base blitz, especially like on early downs, but like you have to mix up what you're doing, and they didn't mix that up enough. So that's part of it. And the other part is they just didn't have as many playmakers. So one of the big reasons why the havoc rate took off was because Benjamin Morrison took off, right? He became like, a guy making a ton of plays on the ball. So that's part of it. But, you still need, so you have a guy who, you think is going to be a playmaker. And Brandon Joseph wasn't that playmaker that people thought he was going to be in the secondary. So they need more playmakers in the secondary, but they need it at all 3 levels, right? Like really like and Botello really was part of it too, because he increased the havoc because he became a guy who started making plays at the end of the year. So they need like Botello to do it, but they need more. You need multiple 3-4 defensive linemen to be like big havoc guys. You need at least one linebacker to be like a dominant havoc guy, a playmaker. And the closest guy was Bertrand this year. I think he was double digit, but I think, the 2018 team had 9 guys who were double digits in havoc. 9. There's only 3 for Notre Dame this year. Like, that's not enough. You gotta have more. You gotta have more playmakers, and you can help some of that with scheme, but some of it is also personnel. And we've kind of beaten to death about how the personnel is.
Yeah.
But that has to be improved. And guys have to take a step this year. There's several guys that need to take a step. And say like Cam Hart didn't have a bad year per se, but didn't have the year where you were like, he got his hands on the football a lot. That didn't happen.
Right. So so if it's Ben Morrison, right, that's great. It is. But he can't be a playmaker if they're not throwing the ball his way.
And I don't think they're going to throw the ball as much.
Right. Where do the plays come from then? Right. So when Clark Lee, he was blessed with Tranquil and Coney. Those guys were very good linebackers. Coney especially, just like the instincts on him were just unbelievable, right? Julian Akwara, Khalid Kareem, that sort of thing. Like he had dudes up front, right? And then he had JOK, and then he had Kyle, right? So like those are guys who you can't really avoid Kyle. You can, but he's a safety. He's going to be around the ball all the time, right? Same thing with JOK. You can't really avoid him. He plays in the slot. He blitzes. He does all these other things. It's just he is going to do things that the offense, unfortunately, just has to deal with, right? And they didn't have anyone like that last year. They didn't like Marist. So much about it was like he had to play a role that he just wasn't ready to play in terms of being a playmaker, right? Brandon Joseph, same thing, right? Like he was billed as a guy who's always around the ball. He was like never around the ball, right? He was just complete like zero on that front, except for the Syracuse game, which, by the way, like that's what happens when you have a guy who's around the ball all the time. Like it just totally changes the game. So, they need Xavier Watts to make that jump, right? Because it looks like he's going to be one of the starting safeties, right? Like Watts, Harper, Henderson, and DJ Brown, right? Like those guys, like they need to be more playmakers. Like I just think really need Jalen Sneed and Colley to make a difference this year. Like maybe not front line, but they have to be guys who are just, around the ball all the time when they're in the game.
They don't even have to be consistent guys that have to be whatever. They just need to make plays. Like if not one of those, if say Jalen Sneed doesn't become this stud player this year, he has to at least be a guy who like he made a handful of plays this year that were like big, impactful havoc plays.
Yeah.
Right. That's what you kind of need. And obviously you want more than that. But if you add that and then Colley's got that, and then you have some of these young guys who, whatever, like that's kind of where you build off from. And then hopefully you get it. But like, yeah, I think it really is like you have those eraser guys who do so much and make so many plays. Like Owusu Moore is like 20 havoc plays in a year. So he's basically like almost 2 a game where he's just making a negative play that just basically, and a negative play a lot of the time just kills a drive, right? It just kills a drive. So if you got a guy like him, and then you got a guy like Hampton, and you got him on the same defense, and those guys are getting, you're getting multiple of these plays a game from those guys, it changes everything for you.
Yeah.
And you just really need more of those guys. So I think, like what you're saying, they need somebody to step up, multiple somebodies really to step up and be that. And if not, that is going to be a problem because they can prevent big plays and they can do these things and they can not give up these productive drives, whatever. They still might end up struggling in the red zone. They still might not. They still could maybe be good, but you're not going to be great unless you have great players, playmakers, guys that can the difference maker types.
Right. And that kind of segues into the next thing, right? So replacing the pass rush, right? Like that, you're losing Isaiah Foskey, who was the all-time sack leader at Notre Dame. So that's a big loss, obviously. And then Justin Ademilola, who was also one of your better pass rushers, and he's moving on to the NFL. Jason Ademilola, another good pass rusher on the inside. Those guys are out, right? So where do you find that production from, right? Obviously, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, I think you've talked about, his potential as a pass rusher and what he can bring, hopefully with more consistent snaps at the big end. And then you have Jordan Botelho, who really came on at the end of last year, and that's got to be kind of a consistent thing, right? Like it can't be, the end of the year. It's got to be like, hey, are you going to be a frontline guy? That's one.
Yeah.
The Jalen Sneed, they used him as a pass rusher against South Carolina. Apparently Junior Tuihalamaka is a Viper. That's going to be a thing. I don't know if that's like a run game thing. Like if they feel like,
I don't know if that's going to be, I mean, we don't know if it's going to be a long-term thing.
Right. That's who they've got.
Pretty good in the,
right.
In the, the Gator Bowl, I'll say.
Yeah. You've got Josh Burnham. Yeah. You've got Josh Burnham, who was a big time recruit. I think top 150 guy by composite. And so they've got him there at Viper position. And he's got the skill set, I think, to be a dynamic pass rusher on that front. And then inside, there's the Riley Mills, Howard Cross, Gabe Rubio, Nana Safa-Mensah, guys like that. What can they bring on the inside, Jamie? Is this to me, this is the ultimate, like, we got to see how it goes. Hopefully we can get some eyes on camp and that sort of thing and see how it's going. Obviously it's going to be very difficult, right? Like the edge guys, they're going up against Blake Fisher and Joel every day. Right. So that's going to be a difficult situation.
Yeah. But that's how, too, if a guy is really great, I mean, he's winning, or he's he's going 50% against those guys or something, like that's when, a guy took a real step, right? Yeah. Because you're not going to face better tackles than those guys for most of the year. Right. So, I mean, I think with Botello in the small sample size, he had 4.5 sacks in the final 6 games. He basically didn't play, and he played 17 plays before the final 6 games. Yeah. So on defense. So I think, he made the most of his thing. He had 24% pass rush win rate, 38% win rate in true pass sets, no screen, no quick game, no RPOs, etc.
Those are like elite numbers.
Like those are like, I mean, if that's over the course of a full season, he is like an All-American. That is like he's top 3 pass rusher in college football, right? It's like Will Anderson, good, like that. And I don't know how sustainable that is, but like it shows that he's got a pretty high upside. I mean, he took advantage of his reps, is what you can say. So now it at least makes you think they need to give this guy more chances to rush the passer. And obviously he's going to get it this year. And then that's the same thing with Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who kind of got stuck in, it's one of the things. You go to Ohio State. I mean, you got Zach Harrison is playing in front of him. He's going to be a high NFL pick. He was a 5-star kid. He's very talented, physically freakish guy. And I think, but if you look at Javonte Jean-Baptiste in his small sample size, 15th best true pass rush grade on PFF last year, 16% pass rush win rate, 26.5% on true pass sets. Those are all like really, really good. That's like better than Isaiah Foskey good. Right. So, I mean, those could be your 2 starting, and those could be the 2 guys that are your third down pass edge rusher guys. And they could end up being a really good combo, right? That could be really good for Notre Dame. So I think the upside is there for Notre Dame to actually be maybe even better, because I think both Botello and Jean-Baptiste like have higher pass rush ceilings than Justin Adetola for sure. And the one thing you could say about Foskey, I don't think he really was kind of the exact same in terms of his overall win rate that he was compared to the year before in terms of his pressure rate. But the guy just knows how to finish. He just finished. And that counts. I mean, that matters, right? Like, I mean, you get double-digit sacks in back-to-back sack season. You're a great pass rusher. I don't care. I don't care what the win rate says compared to anything else. Yeah, I mean, he finishes better than anybody, right? Like, or than mostly anybody, right? So that matters. So they got to be able to replace that and get that finishing. But like, pressure matters. I really think so. Can you get, I think one of the things that made 2018 and 2019 so great is you had like 3-4 defensive ends that were just like, I mean, you put in the second unit and you're like, that those tackles aren't getting a break. This guy's, Ade Ogundeji's like just whipping this right tackle here, right? Yeah. Or Dalen Hayes is backing up Julian Okwara, but he's still getting after it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think all that, I mean, that's where you kind of want to get to. And obviously, I think Riley Mills, he's a guy that they really, really need to take a big step. And he didn't take that step this year, partially because I think he was kind of like inside, outside, whatever. And I don't think he's just not best suited to be an outside rusher, especially because he's not a guy that when you get into space, he's going to win. You know, he needs a guy, he's got to win inside where he's quicker than guards and not going to be having to chase down like a Caleb Williams or whatever, right? Like he's got to get into his face. So I don't know. I think the pass rush could end up being really, really good this year. You know, I think they were 13th in sack rate last year, which was a really good number, obviously. And I think they could be similar to what it is, but I mean, there's a lot of like, can Botello and John Baptiste get close to that same level that they were at? Because if they're close to that same level, that's still like close to elite, basically. And I think it's achievable.
Yep. I mean, the upside is there. I mean, it sounds exciting. It's got to happen, right? It's got to happen. And our last point here is the just development of the young players, right? So we've talked about Jalen Snead's son. We've talked about Junior Tulihalamaka. We've talked about Josh Burnham, right? But on the back end, right? So I think Ben Morrison too. Like, avoid the sophomore slump. You know, try to do whatever you can to avoid that, right? Like to keep his ascent going up, right? And to truly develop into an All-American. Jade Mickey, like he's a greatly important player for Notre Dame. You know, in order to, like, you want him an option. Like Cam Hart's had a lot of shoulder problems, right? So like that's likely to be something of a recurring thing, right? So that's the thing. I consider Xavier Watts to be involved in that. Like he's an upperclassman, but young to the safety position. So I think his development is super important. Let's see who else. I mean, the freshman, right? Like Christian Gray, like is he someone who can come in and be a important player for you, you know, and that sort of thing. So, is there anyone you were thinking of?
Well, I think
Tyson Ford, another one.
Tyson Ford, Aiden Gobera, Burnham. I think the chances that all three of those guys are going to take big jumps, you know, just normal history says that probably not all three, you know,
right.
Probably one, but if they get two of those guys and they become like key rotation pieces where they're really like ascending, and then all of a sudden as the year goes on, you're like, whoa, these guys are playing at a starter level. That's going to be huge. That's going to be huge. I think so. That's big. Those defensive line guys, you know, and I think linebacker is going to be the most interesting because I think you can't play with the same level that they did last year. You know, you just can't and be a great defense. You have to have, you know, another level there, and it's just, I mean, there's obviously a lot of options. There's a lot of options, and I mean, including some freshman guys that I don't think, like, I would be surprised if Jaden Osbury and Drake Bowen play. It's really hard for a freshman linebacker to make a big impact. I mean, you just don't see it around the country. It's not just a Notre Dame thing. I mean, even if you look at, look at Teo and Jalen Smith, when they were 5 stars, unbelievable. Like, not just 5 stars, like top 5 guys in the entire class, guys. And they, even though you saw some awesome potential from those guys, they weren't like anywhere close to the guys they would become later on, right? So that's one thing to kind of remember about anyone who's like, I think Drake Bowen's getting it, or like, I guess anything could happen, but probably not. Not. It's more likely that year 2 is a big thing for him, right?
Yeah,
because linebacker, the toughest position to play on defense right now in college football, because you have to know so much and you're stressed on every single play, run, pass, influence blocks, all of these kind of things. And that's why you don't see, and you're like, man, why is it Jalen Snead and Prince Colvin? Like, That's why. Yeah. That's why, because if they clicked, all that other stuff clicked, they're clearly better athletes than the other guys who are playing. So can they get all that stuff, and if they can really do that and take off, sky's the limit for the linebacker position.
Boom. There it is. All right, guys, we're gonna leave it there. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It was a good show. I had a good time, Jamie. I think
I just want to get to Evan Olson. He did ask this important question.
Oh, did you rock the hoodie? Were you a hoodie? You know what? Were you a hoodie guy?
I mean, first of all, I'm way too old for no one was rocking the hoodie. I mean, I wish I was that cool that I could have pulled off rocking the hoodie underneath the jersey. First of all, it's like hot and he's like wearing a hoodie out there. Like, I never understand it, but he's a Hawaii guy, so maybe that's just like the thing. I was like not like a full Tom Rathman neck roll, but I had a little something back in the day. I had a little kind of like
cowboy collar.
Yeah. A little something.
Yeah.
I had a little something there. So yeah.
That was not my thing for sure. Definitely did not have a cowboy collar.
I mean, I
didn't rock the hoodie.
I mean, in high school, I was a running back linebacker. And then I was a D lineman in college, right? So
got it.
I mean, that was the thing back then. Like
everyone had a cowboy collar.
Everyone did.
Yeah. It was the whole thing. It was all the big guys.
And I will say, like, and like when I was in high school, I was like one of the only dudes who did it. Yeah. And then you get to college and you're like, oh man, everybody's doing it. Now. And then it doesn't feel as cool.
For us, it was the kick plate in the back. And
I had the kick plate too. Yeah, I had it all, man. I loved it.
The kick plate. That's unbelievable. All right, man. Well, so we'll talk to you guys next week about all the developments and that sort of thing. I think we'll go into some 2024 recruiting because there's some exciting stuff that I want to talk about. Some exciting players. We've got to see a little bit of film, so we have some really good informed opinions on some 2024 guys. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Hit the like, hit subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when we're going live. And thank you very much for watching, and we will talk to you again next week.